The day my parents died, I lost more than my family. I lost the last chance I would ever have to ask the one question that had followed me my entire life. Why was my brother always enough, while I was never enough? For 42 years, I watched my parents bend over backward for him. The truck, the college fund, the vacations, the second chances, the forgiveness. And every time I wondered why things were so different for me, I got the same answer. Your brother needs us more. Funny thing is, nobody ever stopped to ask what I needed. My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 52 years old, and this story begins in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio. The kind of town where everybody knows everybody. The kind of town where people smile at church on Sunday and gossip about each other before they reach the parking lot. I grew up in a white two-story house on Maple Street with my parents and my younger brother, Jason. Jason was the golden child. I was the responsible one. And if you've ever been the responsible one in a family, you already know exactly how this story goes. The responsible child doesn't get rewards. The responsible child gets expectations. Jason could crash a car and somehow become the victim. I could bring home straight A's and get asked why one grade wasn't higher. That wasn't bitterness talking. That was simply the truth. I learned it young. When I was 16, I got my first job at a grocery store. Every paycheck went into savings because I knew college wasn't going to magically appear for me. Jason, my parents opened a college fund for him before he even started high school. When I asked about it, my mother smiled. "Claire, you're independent. Jason needs a little more help." That phrase became the soundtrack of my life. Jason needs more help. Jason needs more support. Jason is going through a difficult time. Jason made a mistake. Jason didn't mean it. Jason deserves another chance. Years passed. I worked my way through nursing school, took student loans, worked overnight shifts, skipped vacations, skipped dating, skipped practically everything people in their 20s are supposed to enjoy. Meanwhile, Jason bounced between majors at 3 different colleges before finally dropping out. My parents paid every bill, every single one. Then came his first failed business, a landscaping company. My father emptied nearly $30,000 from his retirement savings to keep Jason afloat. The business failed anyway. A year later, Jason wanted to open a sports memorabilia store. My parents wrote another check. That failed too. Then came the real estate investment. Failed. Then a restaurant partnership. Failed. Then cryptocurrency. You can probably guess how that ended. Every time he fell, my parents rushed in with another safety net. Every time I succeeded, they acted like it was expected, not celebrated. Expected. Still, I loved them. That's the complicated thing about family. You can recognize unfairness and still love the people causing it. By my 40s, I was working as a nurse practitioner. I owned a modest home. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. No handouts, no trust funds, no rescue packages, just hard work. Around that same time, my father started slowing down. At first, it was little things, forgetting appointments, repeating stories, misplacing keys. Then one winter morning, he slipped on ice and fractured his hip. Everything changed after that. My mother tried taking care of him alone, but she was struggling too. Her arthritis had become severe. Simple tasks exhausted her. Guess who showed up? Not Jason. Me. I started driving over after work, then before work, then on weekends. Soon I was handling prescriptions, doctor appointments, physical therapy schedules, grocery shopping, house maintenance, insurance paperwork. Everything. Jason lived less than 40 minutes away. 40 minutes, but somehow he was always busy, always unavailable, always dealing with something. One day, my mother called Jason while I was helping Dad shower. I heard the entire conversation. "Jason, your father could really use some help around the house." Long pause. Then she sighed. "Okay, honey." Another pause. "Yes, I understand." When she hung up, she looked embarrassed. "What happened?" I asked. She forced a smile. "He has a lot going on." Of course he did. Jason always had a lot going on, mostly problems of his own creation, but somehow they always became everyone else's responsibility. Over the next 5 years, my life slowly became centered around caring for my parents. I wasn't forced, nobody demanded it. I simply couldn't watch them struggle, so I showed up, day after day, month after month, year after year. I fixed leaky faucets, balanced checkbooks, cooked meals, cleaned bathrooms, organized medications, sat through hospital visits, held my mother's hand during scary diagnoses, held my father's hand during frightening procedures, and through all of it, Jason remained mostly absent. Sometimes he'd visit on holidays, usually for an hour or two, long enough to take pictures, long enough to tell everyone how much he loved Mom and Dad. Then he'd disappear again. One Thanksgiving, after I'd spent 3 straight days preparing dinner, Jason arrived with a store-bought pie. My mother practically cried with joy. "Look what Jason brought." I remember standing there, holding a roasting pan that weighed 15 pounds, and thinking, "Are you kidding me?" But I smiled, because that's what daughters do. We smile, we swallow it, we move on. Then came the year everything fell apart. Dad was 79. Mom was 76. Within 6 months, both of their health problems accelerated. Doctor appointments became weekly, then daily. Hospital stays became routine. My world shrank to hospital rooms and pharmacy counters. I burned through vacation days, personal days, savings, energy, hope, and still I kept going because family is family. At least that's what I believed. Then one afternoon, I was sitting beside my father's bedside. The room was quiet except for the heart monitor. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Fragile, tired, human. For the first time in my life, he seemed vulnerable. He looked at me, really looked at me, and said something I'll never forget. "Claire?" "Yeah, Dad?" "You've done more than anyone." I felt tears forming instantly, because in 50 years, I had waited to hear something like that. Just once I wanted him to see me, to recognize what I had given, what I had sacrificed. He squeezed my hand, then closed his eyes. A few moments later, he fell asleep. Those were the last meaningful words my father ever spoke to me. 3 weeks later, he was gone. My mother followed him 7 months after that. The grief came in waves, huge, crushing waves. Despite everything, despite the favoritism, despite the hurt, they were still my parents, and losing them felt like losing part of myself. The funeral was packed. Friends, neighbors, church members, former coworkers, people I hadn't seen in years. Everyone had stories. Everyone talked about what wonderful people my parents were. And maybe they were. Human beings can be loving and flawed at the same time. The funeral ended. Life moved forward, or at least tried to. 3 weeks later, the lawyer called. The estate reading was scheduled for Friday morning. I almost didn't go. I wasn't interested in money. Honestly, I was exhausted, emotionally drained. But I went anyway. Jason arrived 20 minutes late. No surprise there. He walked into the conference room wearing an expensive suit I'd never seen before. Confident, relaxed, almost cheerful. That should have been my first clue. The lawyer introduced himself and began reviewing documents. The house, the savings accounts, the investment portfolio. Everything sounded straightforward. Then he reached the final section. I remember every detail. The smell of coffee, the hum of the air conditioner, the ticking clock on the wall. Because that was the moment my world shifted. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, looked down, then read the final distribution. The family home, to Jason. Investment accounts, to Jason. Savings, to Jason. Retirement assets, to Jason. Everything, every single thing, to Jason. Silence filled the room. I honestly thought I had heard him wrong. Maybe there was another page. Maybe he wasn't finished. Maybe my name would come next. But it didn't. Jason inherited everything. I inherited nothing. Not a dollar, not a keepsake, not even my mother's wedding ring. Nothing. I felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. The lawyer continued speaking, but his words blurred together. My ears were ringing. Jason leaned back in his chair. And for the briefest second, I saw a smile, a tiny smile, almost invisible, but it was there. A smile that said he wasn't surprised, a smile that said he expected this, a smile that made my stomach turn.
The meeting seemed over. People started gathering papers. Chairs scraped against the floor. Jason stood up. Then the lawyer cleared his throat. "Actually," he said, "before everyone leaves," the room stopped moving. The lawyer opened a separate folder, a folder nobody had seen before. He looked directly at me, then spoke 7 words that changed everything. "There is one more document you need to see."
The room went completely silent. Not the kind of silence where people are listening, the kind where people are waiting for someone to break, waiting for someone to cry, waiting for someone to beg. My mother folded her arms, my sister smirked, and my father wouldn't even look at me. For a second, I honestly thought maybe I was dreaming, because 5 minutes earlier, I had walked into that room believing we were finally going to talk like a family. Instead, I was sitting there being treated like a stranger. Then my mother pushed a folder across the table. "Sign it." I stared at her. "What is it?" "Just sign it." The lawyer cleared his throat. "It's a document acknowledging that you voluntarily waive any claim to the family trust." I blinked. The family trust? The one Grandpa spent 40 years building? The one he always said would be divided equally? The one he told me about just 6 months before he passed away? That trust? I looked at the lawyer. There must be a mistake. My sister laughed. Actually laughed. No mistake. I turned toward my father. "Dad?" Nothing. Not a word. He kept staring at the table. That hurt more than anything. People think betrayal feels like anger. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it feels like watching someone you love choose somebody else right in front of you, and realizing they've been choosing them for years. My mother leaned forward. "Let's not make this difficult." I looked at her. "Difficult?" My voice cracked. "Difficult?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I spent years helping this family. Years. When Dad lost his job, I helped cover bills. When Grandpa got sick, I drove him to appointments. When the house flooded, I took vacation days to help repair it. And now you're asking me to walk away from everything? My sister rolled her eyes. There she goes. There she goes. Like I was being dramatic. Like I was the problem. Like my entire existence was some inconvenience everybody had learned to tolerate. The lawyer looked uncomfortable. Good. At least somebody in the room still had a conscience. I pushed the folder back across the table. No. My mother's expression changed instantly. Cold, sharp, dangerous. "What did you say?" I said no. For the first time all afternoon, I felt calm. Maybe because the worst had already happened. Maybe because something inside me finally snapped. Whatever it was, I wasn't afraid anymore. "I'm not signing anything." My sister leaned forward. "You don't deserve any of it." I looked directly at her. "Why?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then said something I'll never forget. "Because you always made everything about you." I actually laughed, not because it was funny, because it was insane. My entire life had been spent making everything about them. I skipped opportunities for them. I sacrificed for them. I showed up for them. And somehow I was selfish. Funny how that works. People will take from you for years, then call you selfish the moment you stop giving. The meeting ended badly, really badly. My mother threatened legal action, my sister accused me of greed, my father stayed silent, and I walked out, alone, again. But this time, something felt different. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to earn their approval. I wasn't chasing their love. I wasn't fighting for a seat at a table where nobody wanted me. I was done. Or at least I thought I was. Because 2 days later, everything changed. I was at home making coffee when my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't answer. Something told me to pick up.
"Hello?" A man's voice came through. "Is this Emily?" "Yes." "My name is Robert Hayes." The name sounded familiar, very familiar. Then it hit me. Robert Hayes, Grandpa's attorney. Not the lawyer from the meeting, his actual attorney, the one he'd worked with for nearly 20 years. I sat down immediately. "Mr. Hayes?" "Yes." "I've been trying to reach you." My stomach tightened. "Why?" There was a pause. Then he said 7 words that changed everything. "Your grandfather left instructions for you." I froze. "What?" "Instructions." My heart started racing. "What kind of instructions?" Another pause. "The kind that were supposed to be delivered after his estate was settled." I couldn't breathe, because suddenly 100 memories came rushing back. Grandpa's strange comments the last year of his life, the way he'd look at me sometimes, like he wanted to tell me something, the way he'd always say, "Not everything is what it seems, kiddo." At the time, I thought he was talking about life. Now I wasn't sure so much. Mr. Hayes continued, "Before we begin, there's something you need to know." I nodded. "What?" He folded his hands. "Your grandfather anticipated this." Every hair on my arm stood up. Anticipated what? What your family would do. The room suddenly felt smaller. "What are you talking about?" He slid a sealed envelope across the desk. My name was written on the front, in Grandpa's handwriting. The second I saw it, tears filled my eyes, because I'd know that handwriting anywhere. Birthday cards, Christmas notes, little messages left on the refrigerator. It was him, really him. One final message, waiting all this time. Mr. Hayes nodded toward the envelope. "He wanted you to read it privately." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I unfolded it slowly, and the moment I read the first sentence, I knew my entire family had made a massive mistake.
My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the letter. For a moment, the room disappeared. The lawyer's office, the desk, the filing cabinets, everything faded. All I could see was my grandfather's handwriting, the handwriting of the only person in my family who had ever made me feel seen. I took a breath and started reading. "My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, then unfortunately I was right. And if I was right, your mother and sister have already shown you exactly who they are. First, let me tell you something I should have told you years ago. You were never the problem. Not once, not ever." The tears immediately blurred my vision. I stopped reading, because those were the exact words I had spent my entire life waiting to hear. From Grandpa, from my parents, from my sister, from somebody, anybody. But nobody ever said them. Nobody except him. I wiped my eyes and continued. "You spent your life trying to earn love from people who were supposed to give it freely. You worked harder, you sacrificed more, you forgave things that should never have been forgiven. And every time you were hurt, you blamed yourself. Please stop. You did nothing wrong." I couldn't stop crying, not because of the money, not because of the inheritance, because for the first time in my life, someone had finally acknowledged what happened. Someone had finally seen it. The favoritism, the manipulation, the years of emotional neglect, all of it. Grandpa saw everything, and he always had. I turned to the next page. That's when my heart nearly stopped. Now for the part nobody knows. The trust your mother believes she controls is not the real estate. I stared at the sentence, read it again, then a third time. The trust wasn't the real estate. Then what was it? Mr. Hayes smiled slightly, like he'd been waiting years for this moment. "Keep reading." I continued. 23 years ago, I sold a portion of my company. I never told the family what I did with the proceeds. They assumed I spent it. I allowed them to believe that. My eyes widened. 23 years ago? Grandpa's company had been extremely successful. Everybody knew that. But after he retired, nobody really knew what happened to the money. The family always assumed it disappeared into investments and taxes. Apparently not. I kept reading. I invested the money quietly, very quietly, and over 23 years, it grew. My pulse started racing. I looked at Mr. Hayes. He nodded. Keep going. The account now belongs entirely to you. I froze. The room went silent. Even the air conditioner seemed to stop. My voice barely worked. Entirely? Mr. Hayes nodded. Entirely. I swallowed hard. How much? For the first time all afternoon, the lawyer actually smiled. Then he slid a statement across the desk. I looked down and nearly dropped it because the number had 7 digits, not 6, 7. Over $8 million. I honestly thought it was a typo. 8 million. I checked again. Same number. 8 million. My entire body went numb. Not because I was excited, because it didn't feel real. I had spent years worrying about mortgage payments, medical bills, retirement savings, and now I was staring at a number that could change everything. Mr. Hayes leaned back. Your grandfather wanted the money protected. Protected from who? He laughed softly. I think you already know. And unfortunately, I did. The next morning, my phone exploded. Calls, texts, voicemails, family members, friends, neighbors. Apparently, word traveled fast. Small towns are like that. A secret lasts about 15 minutes. My mother called first. I ignored it. Then she called again, and again, and again. Finally, I answered. Big mistake. The second she heard my voice, she started crying. Not emotional crying, performance crying. The kind I'd seen my whole life. Emily, I stayed silent. Why didn't you tell me? I laughed. Actually laughed. Tell you what? The money. There it was. Not, how are you? Not, I'm sorry. Not, can we talk? The money. Always the money. I shook my head. You threw me out of the family. Silence. Then came the guilt trip. How can you say that? Easy, because it happened. You tried to make me sign away my inheritance. More silence. Then she said something unbelievable. We were only protecting the family. Protecting the family by stealing from me. Amazing logic. I ended the call. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty afterward. A week later, things got worse. My sister showed up at my house, unannounced.
Of course. She stood on my porch holding coffee and fake smiles, the same smile she'd used her whole life whenever she wanted something. I opened the door. She immediately hugged me. I didn't hug back. Awkward. Very awkward. She stepped inside, started talking, and talking, and talking, like none of the betrayal had ever happened. Finally, she got to the point, because people like that always do. Mom's struggling. There it was. I almost smiled. Really? She nodded. The bills are piling up. Interesting, because apparently there was plenty of money available when I needed nothing, but now suddenly everyone needed help. I sat down. Let me ask you something. She looked nervous. When Grandpa died, did you know? Her face changed instantly. Got it. That was my answer. She knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. The color drained from her face. Emily, did you know? She looked away, and that was all I needed. The following month was chaos. Family members started taking sides. Some apologized, others doubled down. A few even accused me of being greedy. Imagine that. The woman they tried to cut out completely was somehow the greedy one. People are funny. They'll excuse theft, excuse betrayal, excuse lies. But the moment consequences arrive, suddenly they care about family. 3 months later, my mother called again. This time she sounded different, older, smaller, tired. For the first time, there was no performance, no manipulation, no strategy, just regret. "Emily?" "Yes." A long silence followed. Then she whispered something I never expected to hear. I was wrong. I closed my eyes, because for years I imagined that moment, thousands of times. Yet when it finally arrived, it didn't feel like victory. It felt sad, very sad, because the apology came 20 years too late, maybe 30. Still, it mattered. She cried, I cried. Neither of us said much. Sometimes there aren't enough words. My mother passed away 11 months later, peacefully, in her sleep. And the strangest thing happened at her funeral. I wasn't angry, not anymore, because carrying anger for decades is exhausting. Eventually, you realize something. Forgiveness isn't about setting somebody else free. It's about setting yourself free. Over the next few years, I used Grandpa's inheritance exactly the way he hoped I would. I paid off my home, started a scholarship program, helped local students attend college, donated to the community hospital, funded programs for single mothers, created opportunities for people who reminded me of myself, people who worked hard, people who got overlooked, people who needed somebody to believe in them, the way Grandpa believed in me. One afternoon, almost 4 years later, there was a knock on my front door. I opened it and froze. Jason stood there, older, thinner, broken. Life had clearly not been kind to him. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he looked down and said quietly, "I need help. Not money, help. Real help. The kind you can't buy, the kind only family gives." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. I studied his face. The arrogance was gone. The entitlement was gone. The golden child was gone. Standing in front of me was simply a man who had finally run out of people to rescue him. And for the first time in our lives, we were equals. He started crying, then said something I never thought I'd hear. "You were always stronger than me." I felt a lump form in my throat, because deep down, I think he knew it all along. Everyone did. That night, after he left, I sat on my back porch and watched the sunset, the same way Grandpa used to. And I thought about everything that had happened, the favoritism, the betrayal, the lies, the inheritance, the revenge I thought I wanted, and the peace I actually found. Then I remembered something Grandpa once told me when I was 12 years old, a sentence I didn't understand back then, but finally understood now. He said, "The people who overlook your value don't get to decide your worth." For 40 years, I spent my life trying to earn love, trying to earn approval, trying to prove I mattered, and in the end, the greatest gift Grandpa gave me wasn't the money, it wasn't the inheritance, it wasn't even justice. It was the truth that I had been enough all along. And once you learn that, nobody can ever take it away from you again.